Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Airtime with Jordan. I'm your host, Jordan Faso, and this is the grand final review edition of the podcast. We made it, and, it was a little bit of a letdown from a competitive standpoint, unfortunately, from the Swans' perspective, but, what a dominant performance by the Lions. I was pretty high on them all year, not all year, but I was pretty high on them, going into this game. As people of the podcast know, I wasn't that high on them in the previous 2 weeks, but they just put Sydney down really early and never really looked back. I'll start on the Sydney side. Just for today, I'm just going to go through sort of both sides, what didn't work for Sydney, what worked for Brisbane, and a bit of like the fallout, I guess, for both teams, more so on the Sydney side on that sort of topic. But let's get started, and we'll start with Sydney, as I said, and it seemed like they just didn't have good process early and didn't bring the required pressure either. Definitely not whatever was required in the grand final anyway, and they were on the back foot early and only really looked like scoring when the Lions turned it over. Even then, the Lions defence was just ready for the quick Sydney transition attack, and between Harris Andrews, Brendan Starcevic and Ryan Lester, they were pretty impenetrable back there. They were the brick wall, and it was just never going to be enough when the Lions were taking care of the ball at the level that they did. The Lions went at 81% disposal efficiency for the game, which is ridiculously high. It shows the lack of pressure that the Swans brought, and they weren't prepared for the fight and for the big day, unfortunately, and that sort of leaned into one of the worries that I had, that they hadn't played at any sort of required tenacity in the lead up to it. They had the first week of the finals where they had that comeback against GWS, but the prelim was just a walk in the park, and Port just weren't competitive at all, and sort of just gave Sydney a bye effectively into the grand final. And their overall form wasn't even great up until the prelim either. They closed the season poorly, and as I said, they only just got across the line against the Giants, who had some mental hurdles themselves. So really disappointing from a preparation standpoint for the Swans. I don't know who that falls on necessarily, but the Swans' tall forwards had zero impact. The smalls in Papley and Hayward, despite kicking the first goal of the match, couldn't really get going either, which is definitely more of a credit to Brisbane's defence and highlights the poor efforts of their midfield. And it was just a very poor effort from their stars in the middle, and it was disappointing to see. They just couldn't match the Brisbane mids. Errol Goulden had 24 touches, which is okay for him, I guess. Didn't feel like he had the same impact and penetration in his kicking, or even just the dare in his kicking. He didn't really bite off any big risky kicks into the corridor or going inside 50 and drilling a target. But Chad Warner had 21 touches, probably not the worst return for him. I think he had still had a higher level of metres gained. I think it was about 600 or something, which it's good for him, but the impact wasn't there. He only went at 52.4% disposal efficiency on the day, which didn't really give his forwards or midfielders around him much of a chance, I guess. And then, Heaney as well was just an absolute no-show. Really poor performance from Isaac Heaney, after people, including myself, thought he might be challenging for the best player in the league, and then he dishes up 14 touches in the biggest game of the year, and that just doesn't cut it, unfortunately. And for him, unfortunately, people just won't take him seriously now in that department until he does something to rectify that sort of performance. And it's not a good day out for the Swans, the big three, as they've come to be known. But and then clearly it was a mistake to bring in Logan McDonald, who was electric with his one total touch for the game. I thought Brodie Grundy had a solid statistical performance, but I thought Darcy Fort just made things hard for him and didn't really have the impact that his numbers might suggest, and he definitely didn't pass the eye test on the day, given how much people expected him to dominate that matchup. And I thought Nick Blakey played okay at times, but again, maybe that was just because the ball was in the back line so much. And I think that Luke Parker, who'd done some good sort of defensive forward roles in the previous few weeks, didn't really have any effect on Harris Andrews. And it's probably not the biggest mistake they made on the day, but it meant they got really nothing from him. He wasn't able to do anything in that matchup, and then late in the game, I think he kicked 3 goals in the last quarter, which was the game was fait accompli at that point. And I think that Luke Parker could have been unleashed a bit earlier and even started him in the middle to provide some of that hunt and physicality around the ball that they were clearly lacking on the day. And yeah, that might have, I don't know if that would have been the difference necessarily, because then you don't have your three best around the ball to start, and which, they were obviously hinging a lot on that to begin with, but, overall just a lot of passengers in this Sydney side on the day, and I sort of wondered what the fallout might be. They are 1-4 in grand finals in John Longmire's time, which is not the record you necessarily would want if you've played in 5 of them. I don't think you fire him by any means, but it does sort of open up the can of worms. Like a lot of other teams would love to be in Sydney's position still, and undoubtedly one of the most well-run organisations in footy. But as I said, I sort of wonder what that fallout might be, especially like when they have these high standards. The Bloods culture has been the envy of the league for a long time, but the string of form in these last 4 grand finals especially maybe taking that away a little bit and taking the gloss off the Bloods culture and the aura, I guess, that surrounds them. But over the 4 losses, they have an average losing margin of 56.5 points, which is just horrific in grand finals. Like, that's just non-competitive, like, just poor football, and you shouldn't, like, especially when you're going into most of those where I think they probably were favourites in 2 or 3 of those. So to have that losing margin is a pretty bad sort of stat to have next to your name as a club. And there's a few issues coming out at the end of next year. You've got Chad Warner, who's out of contract at the end of next year, and rumours are swirling around a WA return. And does this sort of these sort of performances make him question whether he wants to go home? And Dan Rampy, Jake Lloyd, and Luke Parker are all out of contract at the end of next year as well. So it might be a bit of an end of an era for those guys. That all played pretty big roles in this team still. And then if you remove those guys and potentially Chad Warner at the end of next year, the Sydney team starts to look a little bit shaky, especially with no real key forwards coming through. The defence, like how long can Lewis Malikan and Tom McCartan hold up those posts, especially if Rampy is on the decline, which he played an okay game, Rampy, I thought, considering he wasn't his best, and he's probably past his prime now. So yeah, you just sort of wonder what's going to happen with the Swans in the next couple of years, and people questioning whether they've wasted this last 10 years of dominance that they've had around the competition, and to only get 1 premiership in 12 years, I guess. The last one they had was 2012, unfortunately for my Hawks. But anyway, we'll move on. I think that we'll just see. We'll just keep an eye on the Swans at the moment and see how they bounce back next year, and if they can, because if it's another poor year, you can expect some change out of Sydney. Now, I didn't want to drag too long on the Swan stuff, but let's get into the Brisbane content, I guess. And hey, look, the Lions didn't make me look stupid after I tipped against them in the previous 2 weeks, but you could see it unfolding in the first quarter. Their process was just so much better than the Swans, and they didn't even need to dominate the stoppages necessarily. They did it with their ball use and uncontested marking when they did get the ball, and changed it up when needed. They were able to cut Sydney apart through the corridor. I thought every chance they got, they went through the corridor, and if not, they'd just transition quickly around the wings as well. They weren't afraid to run the ball either, with great link-up plays through the middle, with their handball game looking elite from the back half as well. And that blend of being able to take the territory from the Swans in multiple ways really set themselves up, and that you're coupling that with the immense pressure that they put on the Swans. I talked about that last week a little bit, where I said that Brisbane have showed the ability to score in a few different ways over the last 2 finals. It's not just the forwards, it's the team as a whole. And I think I said something like, the Swans have I'm not sure if the Swans have those different gears compared to the Brizzy, and that was sort of rang true on the day. I thought the Swans might be able to hit that top gear at a higher level than they did, and they just weren't able to do that. And Brisbane's ability to play a bit more of a flexible brand of footy and stood up in the grand final, which was Sydney's undoing essentially. I think early in the game, the Brisbane looked a little shaky after their 2 first shots on goal with Charlie and Joe missing, but then Kai Lohmann definitely took the pressure off them with 2 early goals. I thought they deserved them, based on them, as I said, having the better overall process to start the game, and their willingness to take the game on and just pressure and ferocity around the ball. They definitely deserve to have a bit of a lead early in the game, which I thought they didn't necessarily capitalise on early, so I was a little bit worried. But just on some of their individual players, I'll go through, and I think yeah, Hugh McCluggage was pretty incredible in setting the tone early. He had a lot of plays in the first quarter that, sort of exemplified that intensity that I was sort of talking about, and he's just a dude who's not scared of the moment, like can string together like some, good moments in games, and he's, just a classy player, and, every team would love to have him on their squad. And Cal Archie is another one. He had an amazing game on Blakey, I thought, and his ability to lock down and then hit the scoreboard probably puts him at the number one player as far as that player archetype goes. I don't think anyone does it better in terms of being able to take on a defensive assignment as a forward and then still be able to compete and hit the scoreboard yourself. He had 4 goals on the day, so that probably says it all right there, doesn't it? The back line I talked a little bit about, but Harris Andrews, Brendan Starcevich in particular were incredible in their roles. I think Brendan Starcevich probably deserves a bit of a pay rise, I would suggest. Just an elite one-on-one competitor and a great interceptor for a smaller player too. And, the Lions, they didn't even need that much help from Cam Rayner and Zach Bailey, who probably had subpar games by their standards, which is pretty scary to think about how big that margin really could have been if those two got going. And Lachie Neale was as impressive as always. He and as consistent. I thought he played a great game all day. Even at times, like you saw him back in the goal square, saving a certain goal from Sydney at one point, which I just thought, even with that sort of sore foot or whatever was going on with him, just showed like his commitment to play any role that the team needed him to on the day. Because I remember many times during the year when I saw Lachie Neale defending in the opposing team's goal square. So I think it was probably a toss-up between him and Ashcroft for the Norm Smith, and he would have been well-deserved. And, gee, wouldn't that have completed his resume as well? He's got the premiership, 2 Brownlows now, and Norm Smith would have been just the cherry on top as well. So, everyone knows I've talked about Lachie Neale a fair bit on the podcast and what I think of him, so I won't spend too much time on him, and I'll give some flowers to the other guys that I thought were real standouts on the day. And Josh Dunkley was just amazing on Isaac Heaney. I think his day has definitely gone a little bit underappreciated in the media. I think he just bullied Isaac Heaney around the contest, and he gave the Lions that physical presence that I was talking about, and that I thought maybe Sydney lacked on the day. They definitely lacked it on the day, and sort of what I was getting at. Maybe they should have put Luke Parker around the contest early, especially in a final. But Dunkley was just awesome. He just gave them that physical presence, and couldn't stop him necessarily inside, could they? And then, Zorko's ability to set up their transition and be hell-bent on getting the ball back in the corridor. Every time he gets the ball, he's just looking there to find a target in the corridor, and that was just a tone setter, I thought, for the team. He had 7 intercept possessions on the day, 26 touches at 96.2 disposal efficiency, which is just a wild performance, given the pressure that should be there on grand final day. That sort of just shows the lack of pressure that the Swans paid to him. He went at 96.2% in disposal. Like, that's just too much for someone that they should have been locked in on, and shouldn't have allowed that time and space for him to use the ball that well and that effectively. And, they tried. They used James Jordan on him early, and he just wasn't able to shut him down fully. And then they moved James Jordan onto Will Ashcroft, which just fucked them even more in the end, because Ashcroft kept dominating, and then Zorko got off the hook as well, and it just sort of exacerbated the issue, I thought. And I will talk about Will Ashcroft a little bit, because my boy Will Ashcroft, and I've been high on him for a few weeks now, or not a few weeks, probably the best part of the 2 months or whatever I've been talking about him, and that form leading into the finals, and what a return to footy. He just has not missed a beat, and he was quite comfortably their best finals player, I think, across all 4 finals. He capped it off with the Norm Smith at 20 years old. Was just instrumental all day, I thought. He's so creative with his handball game. He's elite at finding targets by foot as well, I thought. He went at 86.7% disposal efficiency on the day as an inside mid. That is a crazy level to hit. He had 6 inside 50s, 11 score involvements. And he's just a great contest player for how young he is. He has the ability to find time and space in the contest. Sort of, I guess, like, him and Lachie Neale are very similar in terms of how they play, and his hands are almost a clone of Lachie Neale's. I'm convinced of it. Both are just so clean. They just don't give the opposition teams a chance to tackle them, because they never fumble the ball. As soon as they got it, they've gone. And that's the other thing. Their acceleration out of stoppage is just incredible as well. And I think that those two must work very closely together, and they have huge overlap in their skill sets. But I think that it's pretty scary what Will Ashcroft can be, and I can't comprehend how this guy is a second-year player. He's a number one pick, Norm Smith medalist, and I still feel like he's probably underrated at the moment. People talk about Harley and more so Nick Dacos, I guess, is the best young players in the comp, but this guy has accomplished as much, if not more, than Dacos has at this stage of his career, and absolutely has Harley Reid covered. Harley's just battling away in a bottom team, so we won't do too much comparison there at the moment, but I do think it's a genuine question about who would you rather between Dacos and Ashcroft, and obviously there's no bad answer here. Like, they're both truly great young players, but if I had to pick, I'm taking Ashcroft. His contest work is already sort of above the level of Nick Dacos's. They both played inside mid this year, and and he did it at a higher level than Nick Dacos, and that, in my opinion, makes him a more valuable player. Dacos has spent the year as an inside mid, like I said, and his disposal efficiency fell off a little bit. I think that Dacos' best position is half back, which just, in my opinion, isn't as valuable as Ashcroft's ability to play right in the middle. And there's still development to go on with both players, obviously, but they're both creative, but the efficiency is just in Ashcroft's favour at the moment, and that's sort of what everyone has been talking about with Nick Dacos, is how clean and how good he is at finding kicks and creative and stuff. But Ashcroft has got him in all those areas as well, I think, and he's got the burst away from stoppage. He's better in close, and just for that reason alone, the fact that I think that he has that positional importance, and it's just a more important position, and he plays it better. And I think that Dacos probably won't be that inside mid to the same degree once Collingwood have a bit healthier of a year next year. And I'm not having a crack at Dacos here. I just want to make that clear that every team and every fan would consider him one of the most prolific and established prospects in recent memory. I think that it's just that I've been banging the drum on Ashcroft for the best part of 2 months, because he deserves just as much attention as praise as Nick Dacos has had, and I understand that's not going to be the case because he doesn't play for Collingwood, but he's done it on the biggest stage in the most important position and role there is in footy, so there isn't really much you can do to discredit him so far in his career. And just very excited to see where his career goes from here. And I just wanted to make that comparison. I didn't want to make it about Dacos or anything. I just wanted to say, this guy he's amazing. He's people just need to really key in on it, and I'm glad he won the Norm Smith, because I think that should propel that conversation forward. And just going back to Brizzy in general, nobody really played badly, and it would take me forever to go through in depth each player that played well on the day, but overall, I'm just so happy for this club and Chris Fagan, one of the teams that I've been rooting for over the last few years. Obviously, a bit of a connection with Hawthorn there, and Hodgie and Grant Birchall and Fagan all going there. So, I've always had a little bit of a soft spot over the years for them, but they've been knocking on the door for the best part of 6 years now, and they still have a chance to compete in the years to come, with the only notable retirees probably being Zorko, who definitely goes around again given the quality of his year this year, and then whatever happens with Joe Danaher, I guess. But you look towards their future, and so many guys are yet to hit their prime, and you couple that with the fact that they're getting another Ashcroft who is tipped to go number one in the draft this year, and then another Lions Academy kid in Sam Marshall who's tipped to go in the top 25 as well. So for a team to get the number one pick and then another guy within the top 25 essentially for free, it gives them a bright future, and that's probably the best place to be in sport when you've got a bright future coupled with being competitive now and challenging for premierships. It's the best place to be in sports, in my opinion, as a team. So with that being said, enjoy it, Lions fans, and to all the AFL fans, stay tuned. I might have a bit of a break next week, but it does never stop the AFL, as I will cover some of the AFL trade period stuff, do some season reviews for the teams when it gets a bit quieter between the trade period and the draft, and then in the lead up to the draft I'll do some draft prep on some of the top prospects and what we can expect for them and where the best fits will be. So that being said, I will be doing some more NBA content as that draws closer. The season is just around the corner for that, so a bit more of an NBA focus on the podcast in the next few weeks and going forward. But as the AFL, those whatever periods come through, like the trade period and the draft and stuff, I will be focusing on them as well. And then, as the AFL preseason rolls around, we will turn our focus back to AFL, and then probably flip-flop again when the NBA finals and playoffs start. So, it's going to be a busy few months on the podcast, but stay tuned and let's go on this journey together. So, anyway, thanks for listening, guys. That was a great AFL season, and congrats to the Lions.